I'm here again at the Mer Bleue Bog. The last time I was here, it was to talk about sandy soils on the old sandbars, the sand ridges that line both sides of Mer Bleue. Today I'm here to talk about the bog itself. Bogs are the fourth type of wetland that we get in the Ottawa Valley, and they are at the same time both possibly the most interesting and also the most boring of the wetlands, and I'll explain why as we take a walk through. My name is Nick Stow. I'm an ecologist, and this is the ecology of the Ottawa Valley.
Come here and see if that doesn't freeze?
I don't think so. I don't think it gets.
What is a bog? Like fens, a bog is a peatland. But unlike fens, bogs are out of contact with the bedrock and the groundwater that provide fens with their nutrients. Bogs, by definition, only receive nutrient inputs from precipitation, from rain, from snowfall, or even from dust falling on the bog. That makes them very, very nutrient poor. Bogs are also very acidic, which further limits the access of plants to nutrients. How bogs develop is a very interesting geochemical and biochemical feedback process. Like fens, bogs develop under conditions that limit the rate of decomposition. Might be low in oxygen, might be naturally low in nutrients, might be very cold conditions. Conditions that limit bacterial decomposition of plant matter. And because of that, we get a buildup of plant matter, of partially decomposed plant matter that we call peat. So bogs, like fens, are peatlands. The difference is that in a bog, there is much more limited capacity for the ecosystem to neutralize the acids that are produced by that partially decomposed plant material. And so you get a very, very slow buildup of organic acids. Eventually, the system reaches a tipping point at which the acidity favors the growth of sphagnum mosses over the brown mosses that you would find in a fen. Sphagnum mosses further acidify the environment. They take up positive cations in order to grow. A cation is a positively charged ion, a positively charged chemical ion. They take those up, and in order to do that, they release hydrogen ions. And hydrogen ions are what is responsible for acidic conditions. So once you get a peatland that becomes dominated by sphagnum, it very, very quickly becomes acidic. A peatland, a fen, may become a bog over time. As the peat builds up in a fen, it may actually reach the point where the surface of the fen becomes elevated above the level of the groundwater, isolating that elevated portion of the peatland from that groundwater. When that happens, you only get the nutrients from precipitation. You get dominance by sphagnum mosses, and you begin to get acidic conditions. So it's a very interesting feedback loop. Bogs tend to have a lot more peat than fens do. Peat accumulates at about 1 millimeter per year. So over the last 10,000 years that Mer Bleue has been here, it has developed a peat mat that is almost 10 meters thick. That's an enormous amount of stored carbon. And peatlands, and bogs in particular, are very, very important for the storage and sequestration of carbon. So it's this moss, this sphagnum moss, that makes this bog what it is, really. I said bogs are at once both fascinating and at the same time the most boring of wetlands. And it's the low biodiversity of bogs that makes them a little bit boring. In a true bog like this, there will be probably no more than 15 species of plants growing. The conditions are simply too acidic, too low in nutrients, and in fact too dry for a lot of plants to grow. We get the fact that it's a dry environment may be counterintuitive, but when you think that, recall that the bog is elevated above the contact with groundwater, it's only receiving water from precipitation. The plants that grow here are adapted to those dry conditions. Because bogs sequester and store so much carbon, they've become a matter of intense research by climate scientists. There is in fact a long-term research facility here at Mer Bleue looking at the impacts of climate change on Mer Bleue Bog and the possible feedbacks that might occur if in fact climate change does impact this bog. The fear is that climate change, increasing temperatures, will increase rates of decomposition in bogs, particularly those bogs, of course, where temperature is a constraint. Those would be northern bogs, like the ones that surround that are in the Hudson's Bay lowlands. If temperatures increase to the point at which decomposition rates in those bogs increase and those bogs become a net source of carbon rather than a net sink of carbon, we could end up with a nasty feedback loop. We would see increased temperatures causing increased decomposition, increased release of carbon. Carbon increases the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect results in higher temperatures, and we get this continual cycle that could ultimately see massive loss of carbon from those areas and massive inputs of that carbon into the atmosphere. The studies here at Mer Bleue have shown this bog so far to be remarkably stable. That might be because the hydrologic conditions, that is the water conditions here, the groundwater conditions, are very, very stable due to the position of the bog, the influence of the sandbars, those sand ridges that border this bog. Conditions here seem to be pretty stable. So there doesn't seem any immediate fear that we're going to see the loss or deterioration of Mer Bleue. But in more northern latitudes where temperature low temperatures are more of a factor, and where we see temperatures increasing at a faster rate than anywhere else on the planet, the impacts of climate change, the possibility of those feedback loops are very, very concerning. One of the plants that likes bogs is the blueberry. Delicious. Mer Bleue is a Ramsar wetland. That is, it is recognized internationally as a significant wetland. It's remarkable to think that within a 20-minute drive of Parliament Hill, you can come to a wetland that has been recognized internationally for its values. The wetland is, this boardwalk is maintained by the National Capital Commission. It is an accessible boardwalk. It's short, so people with limited mobility can easily access it. If they're in, like me, with bad knees, or in wheelchair or a walker, this is a great place to come and spend an hour or two. There's a picnic ground with shelters, there are outhouses, there's good parking, and if you come at the right time of year or right time of day, you also have a very good chance of seeing wildlife. It's one of the best places in Ottawa in the wintertime, for example, for feeding chickadees. Thank you for joining me today, and hope you'll join me for my next video.